Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber, and with me as always is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, and we have a huge guest update, don't we? A major multi-year project has an update.
Yeah, TCU alum Andrew Bowser, who you may remember his episode where we were talking about the Kickstarter that he was doing for making a feature film, not only has distribution, you can now watch it on a Screenbox, which I think you can get through Amazon Prime really easily. But they just announced today that the Blu-ray is coming out on December 19th. The movie is called Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls. And yeah, I mean, when we had him on the show, it was just an idea. It was just like there's literally a Kickstarter. So
Yeah. He was trying to raise enough funds to make this thing happen.
And now it's a real thing. It's a real thing. It has happened. The movie, was at Sundance. I know it played in theaters for a bit. You can now stream it on Screenbox. And in just a few weeks, you'll be able to purchase it on Amazon on Blu-ray. Matt and I were Kickstarter backers. So, we'll be getting our Blu-rays in the mail at some point here soon as well, amongst whatever other goodies were involved in the tiers that we pledged at. But that is a huge deal. We now have had, someone on TCU who said they were going to make a movie, made a movie, and now people can buy the Blu-ray of that movie. Pretty awesome.
That's
Pretty
right.
Awesome.
It's real now. I think it's officially a success at this point, right? Like, obviously, this isn't the end of the process. It's not. The book is not closed on this film. It's kind of the beginning of the end, right? And that's just, I don't even know how to describe it, because we've only talked to a few people who have done something like this. Meat Canyon had an idea for a huge project and then put that together and then did the project, and boom. Obviously, Smiling Friends worked in this same way, where it's a really ambitious, multi-layered, complex, expensive, difficult thing. It takes many years, and we just don't see this a lot because it's not really possible to see it a lot. Especially when it's like driven by an individual. This is just so hideously complex to do when you're not, a studio. Obviously, studios can do it because that's what they do. But if you're a guy with an idea that you want to turn into a big, real thing, well, yeah, it's going to be a while before we get another one of these to fist pump about.
Yeah, but I like that you said it was sort of the end of the beginning, or is it the beginning? No, it's not the beginning of the end. It's the end of the beginning, because I can see how particularly in Hollywood, once you sort of have something like this under your belt and it is real and you can point to it, and then you can talk to producers and say, hey, I'm the guy who made this.
Yeah.
That is the beginning of your actual career. Before then, you are nothing because you haven't made anything. No one's ever bought anything from you. No one's ever paid any money to watch the thing that you made in the capacity of like the Hollywood system. So, we saw this with Joe Penna, Mystery Guitar Man. He must be the most famous example of someone going from YouTube to Hollywood. He made that short film that I think did well at a festival, and then that turned into the feature film with Mads Mikkelsen, Arctic, I believe it was called, which was a success. And geez, I don't remember what project he's working on now, but I'm pretty sure it's a big one. It has some really big names attached to it. So he's officially in the club, and that's really what it is. It is a club. It's hard to break into, but then sort of once you're in there, you got to make sure not to blow it. But at the same time, you really get to start making more and more projects. Yeah, Arctic was Joe Penna's film that came out in 2018. And I'm just looking at his IMDb real quick because I wanted to see what the movie he's working on now is called.
As you were talking, I was thinking more, I said it was the beginning of the end stage on this, and you're more right that it's the end of the beginning. And of course, I'm cloaking this in you know, in the Churchill speech where he makes that distinction in regards to World War II. But I do think that this is an endpoint of something very significant, and it is now the end of the idea stage. It is that baby's been born, right? This is a real thing now. There's no longer any element of like, I'm working on an idea. No, a lot's got to happen now. A lot will happen. He's got something to point to. This is the beginning of a ton of stuff. But you know what? He's officially, I mean, obviously when it popped up on a screen for the first time, it was official, like this is no longer an idea. but now it's something that literally anybody who's been watching him or following him over the years can just go to Amazon and get. That's a tremendous step. It doesn't get more real than that.
No. So congratulations to Andrew Bowser. You know, it's very cool. Looking forward to getting my copy of Onyx the Fortuitous in the mail, and because I've been holding off on actually watching the movie. I've obviously watched the clips that he's posted, the trailers and stuff like that. It's definitely a love letter to people who grew up during the age of practical effects and sort of weird horror comedy 80s vibes. You know, he's our age. Andrew is our age. So it sort of makes sense that he grew up watching the same probably weird movies on HBO or USA or whatever it was that we did. But speaking of the age of creators, this is something that I wanted to bring up for our topic today because, something has been sort of creeping into my mind as of late, as I've noticed, I would say more and more, I don't want to say creator burnout, because that's a tired phrase. And it's also something that I think is super different than the topic at hand, which I think I want to call more like the creator wall. So years ago, Fred Seibert, who was a strong mentor to myself and Michael Stevens and a lot of people who were working at the time at Next New Networks, of which he was, you know, one of the founding members. I've mentioned him before on the podcast. He's one of those guys. Fred Seibert is one of these guys who is just incredibly influential and legendary in media that most people would never know. I never would have known who he was had I not met the guy. But I mean, he was critical in the early success of things like MTV and I believe Comedy Central, certainly Cartoon Network. I think probably his most prominent thing that he was largely credited for helping bring to light was Adventure Time. You know, everybody knows Adventure Time. That was a huge cartoon,
Sure.
10 plus years ago. But anyway, Fred was a guy who wanted to have lunch with a different person every day. So that was just a mantra that he lived by every single day. He loved talking to different people. He loved creatives. He loved picking people's brains. He loved talking about the industry and the creative process and all this stuff. Like, this guy just lived and breathed really a lot of the stuff that we talk about, I guess, on the podcast. But so one of the lunches I guess that I had with him, or, you know, times I just stopped by his office to chat, he mentioned this idea of, well, creativity sort of being on a fuse, and that creative people burn hot and fast through their 20s, through the first half of their 30s, and then a little less hot and a little less fast through the back half of their 30s. And then once you start getting into the 40s, for some people, the fuse is burnt out. It's just gone. Yeah, the fuse, no fuel, there's nothing burning at all. And you're done. And I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to believe. I was like, there's no way. I don't believe this. I mean, I don't know why I don't believe it. It's just probably naivety on my part. But I'm here to say I'm starting to believe it. I'm starting to see the signs around me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're certainly seeing it. So I do want to remind everybody that when we did that full conversation about being a schlub, That was Fred telling you that you were a schlub.
Yes.
Or not to be a schlub, rather.
Well, that I was, yes. I mean, they're one in the same bit of advice, yeah. I am a schlub, and it's not a good thing to be a schlub. So maybe you should unschlubify Lieber.
That's the level of wisdom we're talking about, and he certainly, I mean, there have been so many things over the years that you've mentioned that's like, Fred told me this, and it's turned out to be some like 10 Commandments level iron law of creative wisdom. And I think this is another one of them, and what's different now compared to, let's say pre-YouTube. Let's just use YouTube as an example, although it's virtually everything. It's music, it's art, it's writing. It is so much easier to do any of these projects now that a lot of people who 30 years ago would never have done them in the first place or gotten very far with it are deep into something that they're not quite as built for as the hardcore freaks of the past who just did the grind through all of this at all costs because that's who they were. Those were the only people 50 years ago doing it. Even writing a book before word processors was a tremendous task. Even on a typewriter, it's slow as hell. I know most people listening to this have never even used a typewriter, but it's significantly slower than using a computer. And if you didn't do it that way and you were doing it by hand, then you're talking the difference between walking and having a car. Like that's the difference there. Now everybody's got a car, so creatively, so I don't think they come into it with as much long-term fuel. I don't think their fuse is as long or as strong, and they hit the wall faster and harder. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's great that those people are doing something they otherwise wouldn't have done in the past. But I don't think they realize that they might not be built for doing it into their 40s. Most of the time you can't even know this. So it's not like you should be 25 years old, start on some kind of creative venture, and have the self-awareness to know how you're going to feel about it when you're 45.
Yes.
Like that's insane.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
You kind of find out when you find out, right? I mean, is that what you think has happened for you, Kevin? Is that you've figured it out as you've burned the fuse?
Well, I don't feel as though it's happening to me. I feel like it's happening to a lot of people who are sort of colleagues of mine, like YouTuber friends, people who are maybe just YouTube acquaintances, people around me. I feel like they're pulling back, they're dropping off, they're checking out, they're dialing it down a notch or 2 or 10, and it seems to be happening more and more. And I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing or a thing that they should fight or like it's probably just a natural thing. I think is how I have been thinking of it. I mean, even if you look at, and this is just you getting into more like scientific stuff, so maybe it's weird to correlate, but I mean, you could look at things like testosterone levels over the course of like a male's life and see sort of like the peak and then the slope. And then that slope gets like really steep, like really quick, like after I think 35 or maybe it's at 40, all of a sudden your testosterone levels are falling off a cliff. Does creativity have anything to do with something like that? I don't know. I don't know if that's been studied. I mean, studying creativity is like a joke for the most part to begin with when it comes to the social sciences. So probably I'm talking about a thing that nobody knows anything about, but nevertheless, it's
certainly unclear. Yeah.
It seems like something that anecdotally I see happening. And there are life circumstances surrounding that too. This is not necessarily like, well, the creativity juices in your brain drain out, as you approach 40, it's not even that. It's like, well, perhaps by the time people are approaching 40, like their lives have changed and their responsibilities have changed to the degree that they're not all that motivated or have the energy to grind away on some creative project for 10 hours a day like they used to do.
I don't think you can really have any sense of any of that, to be honest, whether it's the physical side or what. It would take a really specific type of person to know that they want to do one thing indefinitely. But you can't know what's going to change that, disrupt it, whatever. But I think you can accept that it's going to happen. As you were talking about this, I was thinking the real parallel is in sports, where you just have a point at which you're past your peak. Like there's no denying this. It really doesn't even matter what the sport is. There's, this is why something like I've talked about bowling before, that's something that has a lot of technique in it. Whereas, if your body goes, if you're a wide receiver in the NFL and your knees start to be in trouble, you have a physical reason that you're not going to perform at your peak, right? Well, some of the more finesse technique type things, let's say you're throwing darts. I mean, look, you can do that to an older age than playing baseball or something. But all those things have like seniors leagues, the over 50 tour, the senior tours on this thing, because it just changes what you can execute physically changes. What you can execute mentally changes. Something I've come to understand in the last few years is that 10 years ago, if I had something to do that was on a deadline or I was behind that I needed to catch up, I could pull an all-nighter if I had to and do it and get it done. And it would be the quality that it needed to be. I hated life the next day, but I got it done. Now I can't do that. I can't just caffeinate myself through the wee hours and at 4 a.m. Write a paragraph that's as good as it would be at 4 p.m. And that's a mind thing, like, mind and body mix. But that stuff changes too. And like, I have the same desire I've always had to get that done, to get that project done. I have the same commitment. None of that has changed. But for whatever reason, my execution of the thing is different now. The possibilities for that are different now than they were even in my early 30s. I don't know why. I don't know. Especially because I take care of myself to a much better degree now than I did in my early 30s. Like, it's not even close. I don't know. So I've just accepted the fact that 5 years from now, I do not know what anything is really going to be like. I know that it's possible that there's a shift of some kind in what I can do, what I want to do, my life circumstances. It's gonna be different. I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and Liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description.
So one of the reasons I want to bring this up, I should have said this earlier before all of our Gen Z listeners already stopped listening because this is like old man talk, is that the purpose behind Fred mentioning this was, it was not like a cautionary tale of like, beware, you'll no longer be creative. It was strike while the iron is hot. That's what he was saying. He was saying strike while the iron is hot, because the iron is not going to always be hot. So, you're 28 right now, or, however old I was at the time. He was like, this is the time, and you have to make the most of that time because it's a window. And I'm glad that you brought up sports, because that is a very clear analogy for a thing being a window of being at your peak and being like, okay. And I also wanted to say Charles Barkley about getting older as an athlete always says Father Time is undefeated. That's Charles Barkley's phrase about athletes getting too old to be able to perform at the levels they previously were able to. So yeah, it was really like, you need to realize that you have a window, and people, like I said, like you said, people understand this as an athlete. If you're a running back, everyone says that like the wall for a running back is 30. Like the greatest running backs ever, once they hit 30, are done for whatever reason. Like you almost never are a good running back after the age of 30. And I don't really think that it's well recognized or talked about much that creativity similarly has a wall for people. And it might not be everyone. I mean, surely there are plenty of, musicians, for example, who have created great works, throughout their life and later in life. I think that I read that the peak for novelists is actually in your early 40s. Gosh, I don't remember where I read this, or even what this study was. It had to do with like the different ages that different creative endeavors. Holy cow, what was it actually studying? It was showing like how old the most prolific or best-selling creators were when they made their best works. Something like that. So like, for instance, it would be like, okay, the greatest musicians peaked at an age of like 27. Okay. That's when they made their best album that sold the most records. Or movie directors like make like their most popular film when they're 48 or something like that. I don't know. But it was interesting to me when I read that it suggested that like different creative endeavors have different age peaks. And I remember noticing that novels, like novel writers, were on the older end of that scale. They were like, it was like your early 40s is really when you should be nailing that great American novel or whatever. So that is to say that like, depending on what you're interested in, it could be, you're still working towards mastering your craft. But anecdotally, I've been thinking about it recently, like I said, because I have noticed people mentioning pulling back. I've noticed people who have pulled back without mentioning it, and they just kind of don't talk about it. I know privately people who are pulling back that haven't announced it yet that I can't talk about. But this is all happening to people who seem to be in this kind of like mid to late 30s, early, very, 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 very early 40s, like a 6-year window, maybe between like 35 and 41 or something like that. And as this has been coming up more and more, and as YouTube has been around long enough for like this to start happening to people who were insanely prolific and creating like crazy people for over a decade, that's when the conversation with Fred Seibert popped back into my head, where he's like, look, this thing has a runway. This creativity has a runway, and you need to make sure that you're utilizing it to your advantage, because don't expect to have the same, I don't know, like never-ending desire and passion and energy to, like you said, stay up all night editing a video or working on a song or editing some script, whatever it is. eventually you're just going to be like, I'm tired. I can't do this like I used to. And then what? And that becomes like a new question, which is like, do you still want to do this stuff and you don't have the energy for it, or you don't have the desire for it, or your responsibilities have changed, your interests have changed, your goals have changed? Has the game changed and you haven't changed with it? Whatever it is, it's definitely a new challenge. But again, I want to mention it for the younger listeners in their context to say, keep this in mind. You might want to keep this in mind, that this is a thing, the wall.
It is. And, I actually think the younger people have a really good perspective on part of this, because almost everybody's done it. I think about Ben. I'm going to dox audio editor Ben's mind. Producer Ben's mind is going to be doxed here. If you'd asked him in 8th grade what he wanted to study and do with his time, he would have said engineer. That's what he was great at. It was the courses within that discipline. It's where his interest was at. He was looking at careers on that path. And then 3 years later, he had something else in mind. A lot more similar to what we do. A lot of people have gone through that shift where you remember how you were thinking about things when you were 13, 14, and then what you were thinking at 16, 18, 20, wherever you are now. Really unlikely that they're the same thing. I don't know too many people who conceived of their path at 12 or 13 and then truly stuck with it. I know one guy who truly wanted to be a doctor when he was like in kindergarten and is now a 41-year-old doctor. I mean, like he had an idea he liked and he stuck with it, and he's a happy guy and he's quite good at what he does. That's uncommon. And I'm sure everybody listening to this remembers what they thought when they were in middle school, junior high, whatever, and then what they thought when they were getting out of high school. At the least, you were thinking about it in a different way. So you understand that the changes happen. Now, that's not the hitting a wall / strike while the iron hot thing that Kevin's talking about. But I think the iron changes. I don't think it stops being hot. I think it's different. And so to go back to that athlete example, there's a point at which you are not at the top of your game, but let's say as a veteran in the league, you have value developing younger players. Your role has changed. Your value has changed. When you can't play anymore, maybe you want to become a coach. You go into that. Maybe you go into recruiting athletes in college. There's some tangential thing that's different. And you can be really excited about that. It can be an appropriate fit for your current life and abilities and interests and all of that. The iron can be just as hot. It's just moved, and it's a pivot kind of thing, but it's barely that. It's like the course gets nudged a little bit. It doesn't have to be a shockingly different path. My stuff has nudged over, I'd say 15 years, maybe every 5 years. But like going from writing into editing was a slight shift. And this is text editing, not video editing. From writing articles to editing them, it's in the same ballpark. But I didn't want to write those articles anymore for a lot of reasons. But I did like editing them a lot, and that crept into the YouTube side, and that's developed in a lot of different ways since. But it's never been a remarkable shift because that iron can stay hot by moving it around a little bit to something new. And I think some people have a lot of trouble with that, especially when their identity is very tightly tied to one thing. People who are fantastically popular and prolific YouTube creators may have trouble not being the guy when the time comes. And others will say, I don't have to be the guy. I really enjoy helping other people produce and execute their content. I want to run a network of 5 channels instead of being on camera, whatever. But if you've spent all those years being in this one role, and that is you, it may be tough to evolve that role.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But I think in the episode chat, and thanks to all of our patrons who are hanging out with us today while we record this, Dan the Latch succinctly put it as use it or lose it type of deal. But I wouldn't say use it or lose it. I would say use it before you lose it. It's really, that was what Fred was saying, was use it
There's an urgency,
before you lose it. Because it's the kind of thing that you can't, I mean, look, in a macro sense, that's what all of life is, because you're going to die eventually, and then you can't really use a whole lot of anything. But the point of this conversation and that bit of advice from Fred was to say that you might have a bit of an early death when it comes to the creative craziness that you're feeling right now. And I think we've talked in the past about how, like, one of the saddest things is wasted potential. I think there are a lot of people who see that with, like actors or comedians who famously, or musicians who famously died very, very young. And people feel like sort of the collective loss of the wasted potential of, what could Kurt Cobain have done if he didn't kill himself at 27? What could Chris Farley have done if he didn't, more or less party himself to death? Whoever it is, that's a wasted potential scenario. And you don't have to be overdosing on heroin to waste your potential. You could just be not utilizing it, and then eventually it's too late because you can't go back and it's gone.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff I can't go back on physically. It just is not possible. And I severely regret that I didn't use my window when I had it. I mean, I say severely regret. I'm actually fine with it. But at the same time, I look back and say, like, that was kind of a shame. It wasn't so important to me that I, struggle with daily life because of it. But at the same time, that window is shut. Where somebody filled it with bricks. They plastered over it. It's gone. There's a neat example which is in scholarship. Kevin, you were talking about the novelists and stuff like that. This same type of output and doing the best work applies to academics as well. It's really interesting there because it's often quite tough to identify what their best work is. You don't often know how good it is until long past that work. But if you think about it in terms of academics, there are two stages that have to happen. I'm trying to simplify this as much as I can for the purposes of this discussion. That you've got to research a thing, and then you have to write about a thing. You have to get a tremendous number of inputs, and then at some point that has to be an output. That's scholarship on a bumper sticker. There's a point at which the inputs slow down because you may very well know everything relevant, or such a high percentage of it that it's not worth spending years and years to find out 3 additional details. You've got it all. And so you can't continue to do the research phase in that same way. It literally is not possible. It's not there to do. And you have to shift into output. Some people are really good at that. Shelby Foote is somebody I like a lot. He was a Southern writer. He's famous for his 3,000-page, 3-volume Civil War series, which he wrote by hand, by the way, with a dip pen. So not even a ballpoint pen, not even a fountain pen with a cartridge. He wrote it with a slightly better version of like the feather quill and bottle of ink. He wrote about 2 pages a day when he did have a writing day, and it took him, 20 years to do all of this. But anyway, he did it when he was trying to think of his age. He was probably 60 or something when he finished. I might be wrong about that. But there's a point at which Shelby Foote knew just about everything there was to know about the Civil War. He had collected that information through his life. He wasn't actually a historian. He was a fiction writer. He bounced around a little bit on in college. It's not like he committed to history and figured it out, but he still got enough material, got enough information that he hit a point where he had to start on the output. That happens with a lot of things, even when you don't mean to do it. It's actually happening with Kevin and I right now. That's why we have episodes like we do have, and have for some, 6 months. The topics we're discussing, why we're thinking about them. It's why the Vsauce 2 videos are really about how big topics work, how things in life tend to happen, why they happen. Is it good? Is it bad? Really big general stuff. Well, I'm not saying there's any subject at which we've acquired all there is to know. There's not. But we've spent a lot of time delving in to human topics. A lot of it. And at a certain point, you primarily stop researching and start playing with those ingredients. You've collected all the ingredients. Like, all right, now how do they go together? How do they go together? And that's a totally different process than 15 years ago when you're still collecting ingredients. I think this is why some of the best novelists do their work in their 40s, because they've hit a point where they've collected a tremendous number of ingredients and they've had a bit of time to figure out how to put them together in a unique way. That's very hard to do when you're 21. It's hard to do when you're 80 for a different reason. You're almost too in the weeds with how things go together at that point. If you've ever read any autobiographies from somebody who is very advanced in age, and they wrote them themselves, they didn't have a co-writer or a ghostwriter actually making them good. They're tough. They're usually pretty tough to read. They're only really good when somebody has a unique perspective and a lot of information. So I mentioned Churchill earlier. He wasn't super old when he wrote his series on World War II. Look, Winston Churchill had a very unique up-close perspective on how the minutia of World War II happened. That's really good. It's not like he hit an advanced age and thought, here's my treatise on war. Here's my treatise on human conflict. Why people fight. No, that would have sucked. Anyway, you can't control this shift. You can't. There's a fuse for it. I think this is part of what Fred was talking about with the fuse, where that fuse on the discovery, the research, the fire that goes into the creativity, you hit a point where you kind of burned up what's even available to burn, and then the task changes completely. The task totally changes. You have to work with that. You have to accept that. You have to preferably recognize it, and then do something with that new stage, because it is a completely different stage. It's hard to describe because I've never thought about it in a way that I would express it, right? So I don't know exactly what words to use, but I know there's a big, big difference with us at this point. We did not have the pieces to bounce around and rub together 10 years ago. We just didn't. And we were super excited about finding out those pieces. Well, now we know a lot of pieces, at least in our little domain. We shifted into thinking how and why they go together. Does this make sense?
Yeah, well, I think it makes a lot of sense as far as the natural progression of a lot of this stuff. I was thinking about it in terms of musicians, because I've always noticed like a very clear progression that's similar to what you're describing, but I think it's a little different in that, well, to me, a lot of, and perhaps this is just the type of music that I had always liked to listen to, but I guess I would say popular music and rock music in general, for the most part, it's like, oh, this is going to get conceptual. I don't care. Here we go.
Do it.
It's like,
do it.
It's a lot of this really popular music is like a youthful rebellion. Okay. And it's like younger people rebelling against the norms of the world and essentially saying like, this sucks, or I'm lost, or I'm rejecting society, or, I'm depressed and I'm lashing out in some way. So much of this music is essentially like, I kind of don't know where I am, is how I would describe it at like a helicopter level, there's like a lot of music that's like, I don't know where I am. So please try to follow me with this. I think that if you have an umbrella of I don't know where I am, a lot of things will nest under that, whether it's like
yes,
9 Inch Nails or even like Britney Spears or, Cardi B. I think there's a lot of like, I don't know where I am is like the rallying cry of younger people and their music. And then what happens is that these musicians kind of figure out where they are and their music sucks. They're done. So by like album 3, album 4, it's like, well, what are you talking about now? You're really rich and you're really popular and you're really famous and your life is very isolated and strange. And all you're doing is like going from hotel to hotel, being pampered and idolized and winning awards. You know exactly where you are. This is where you are now. You're like a rich, famous rock star. So what are your songs about?
the point at which Rage Against the Machine became the machine. Yeah.
I think Rage Against the Machine is the perfect example. I've thought about them being such clowns a lot recently because those guys are still pretending that they're raging against the machine in like the most like absurdly ridiculous lack of self-awareness of like basically anyone. All of those Rage Against the Machine guys still think that they're outside the system raging against the machine, meanwhile selling, $300 concert tickets. Yeah. It's like, guys, you are the machine now. Perfectly fair. So what are you what are you rapping about? What are you rap metaling about? You're done.
Right.
So sort of in the same way that you're describing putting the pieces together and then creating some sort of different output, I think a lot of at least like rebellion focused music, which is what really most of popular music is, goes through like a same degradation where it's like, I'm rebelling. I don't know where I am. I'm lost. I'm confused. I'm sad. I'm lonely. And then it's like, well, I'm none of those things anymore. So what is my music about?
And that's exactly it. Things are different because in your case, in that case, you put it together. You put it together and the impetus is gone. You see this when people have kids too, when artists have kids. It's, they do have all of a sudden a much more defined life. So what this is one of those things where here's hopefully why you listen to the Create Unknown, because you're guaranteed not to get this anywhere else at all. This is Durkheim's Anomie. And Kevin, we've talked about this a lot in the past. Anomie. It's that anomie is what drives, not anime, not enema, anomie is what drives the music that Kevin's talking about. You don't quite know how you fit. You may not like the ways in which other people think you should fit. They're not compatible with what you think, which may be changing or confused or incomplete. It's a really bad feeling. Some people feel it so severely that they decide that there is absolutely no place in the world for them. They can't handle it and they check out, either in a soft way or in the ultimate way. Or they turn to drugs and things that just numb that whole feeling. Kevin mentioned Kurt Cobain. That's probably a decent example of somebody who had both physical and mental pain. And really did not feel like he fit. He didn't feel like he fit in the music industry. He didn't feel like he fit much of anywhere. I'm not an expert on him. This is something that, sorry, I had a weird freeze. That does go back many years in terms of people thinking about how the mind works and, how it works. With Kurt Cobain on this specifically, that's something that a woman named Leah Greenfeld did some teaching on in Boston many years ago. And she mentioned Kurt Cobain as an example of this. At the time, it was a much more modern reference. It'd probably been 10 years since his suicide. But he was a great example of a creative who truly felt this way. Well, the one good thing about anime is that you tend to figure it out. If not all of it, you get pieces. You get some sense of purpose. You get some sense of fit, whether it's a job or friends or a hobby, even if it's being passive, the passive receptacle of TV shows. If it's a show you like, then you have a connection to something in the world. I mentioned anime. I think this is a major driver. People think of anime fans as being weirdos a little bit. Obviously, it's much more mainstream than it used to be. But the average anime fan is somebody who deviates from the mean a little bit. I think that's a very important connection for them, to have this style in the broadest sense, this sphere of art that resonates with them when before that they didn't have it. They just simply did not have that kind of frame. But yeah, when you start figuring it out, or you start, that feeling starts to reduce because you have figured it out or life has figured it out for you. You simply do not have the feelings and thoughts and problems that burn that fuse so hot. It can be as simple as you write like crazy because you need money from the writing to live. Let's say you've done okay. You got a comfortable life, not wealthy at all, but like you're not desperate paycheck to paycheck and taking every writing job to pay the bills. Well, guess what? That writing fire is probably not burning in the same way it was when you were 25 and desperate. All these things conspire. All of them conspire to end. It's the same end that Fred warned you about.
Prophesized. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. And you can lose the window. The fuse can run out. It can burn less hot. It can totally change direction. I mean, all this stuff matters. It matters, and it changes as you really just go through life, right? Because you're not going to be the same person at 45 as 25. Just like you were not the same person at 18 as you were when you were 8. 10 years made a big difference then. 10 years made a big difference for us. My mind is unrecognizable compared to 10 years ago. So it's very funny. At the time, since specifically 10 years ago, I was living in Israel, and a major part of why I liked that is because it was hard. And I remember telling a guy, an older guy who I knew quite well, who's from Israel, that was, the feature, not a bug to me. I did not understand or couldn't read Hebrew. That adds a layer of complexity. Some very simple things are Kafka-esque and difficult in that country compared to, say, Nebraska. It's a project. There are a lot of reasons why it was insanely difficult. And I liked that. I really loved it. Now, the prospect of jumping headfirst into every day of my life being like that is hateful. It's like the last thing I would do right now. And Kevin, you're even more so on that, where you were just talking the other day about like, you love eliminating problems.
Yeah.
Big ones, small ones, from, big house stuff to little car windshield annoyances.
Yeah.
And I'm increasingly that way. 10 years ago, I loved being like, oh, this is stupidly difficult for no good reason. Well, yes, of course, that's my number one choice. Let's go. Yeah, Fuse isn't even in the same universe. It's thankfully burning hot for me. But my God, nothing at all resembles the old Fuse.
Yeah, so I want to take a hard turn. I know we're approaching an hour already. Maybe this hard turn won't last that long, but it's something that I really wanted to talk about. We haven't talked about this at all privately, so I want to get your take on it.
Oh, no.
But before that, I just want to wrap up this idea with keep an eye out for this. This is something, like I said, that I'm noticing with a lot of YouTubers. Keep an eye out for it. I think that you'll see a lot more people taking a step back, sort of sunsetting their channels or moving on from their channels in different ways. I think you'll see it more and more as the YouTube age, or like the OG, I guess. YouTube people reach this wall. And the ones who don't hit the wall are the freaks, that Matt was talking about in the beginning, that would be doing this absolutely no matter what, that as long as there's blood pumping in their veins, they will be freaks till the day that they die and continue to just create like the drug habit that it is. Here,
yeah. If I just thought of an example of this. That's if you put a gun to my head and said, "Give me one good reason why I, Justine, will stop caring about Apple products," I would grab the gun out of your hand and just pull the trigger myself.
Yes.
At least then I'd go out on my own terms.
Yeah.
But like, there's no conceivable reason that I see her not caring about the development of Apple products until Apple ceases to exist.
Which, I also don't foresee happening. I actually really look forward to Justine as an old lady, going to some keynote for Apple and being absolutely the most excited person in the zip code because of the new, Apple contact lenses that they've developed in 2072.
She'll be hobbling down the aisle to a front seat with her eye walker, just waiting for the new turtleneck announcement.
Yeah. Which I want to be clear, we mean in the most positive and encouraging and awe-inspiring ways. I mean, that level of passion you cannot help but be excited by.
Everything that I said is with like 1,000% respect.
Respect.
I think it's incredible. And when we say freaks, we mean like,
in a good way.
This person deviates, in such a unique, special way. There are a bunch of people like that, and a lot of them who aren't at all popular. I even see this. I see old guys on reloading and bullet forums who they talk about how they can't shoot anymore. Maybe they have shoulder problems, or maybe they have arthritis. They don't have the precision or the stillness to shoot effectively. And it's like, these guys are going to be talking about bullets until they literally can't talk anymore. It doesn't even matter. They are so happy to talk to the people about it. Their life is still bullets and ballistics. It's crazy. They can't do it. They're like, oh no, this is totally in my mind at this point in my life. But let's dedicate the next 10 hours to talking about it. You're like, this is incredible. The respect here is amazing.
Well, and passion for something was one of the number one, I think, repeated answers when we were asking our guests, what makes someone interesting. So I think everyone recognizes that. Everyone thinks that, by default, it's interesting when someone is passionate about something. So, gosh, even when someone is passionate about something horrific, like serial killers, they're passionate about murdering people. Human beings tend to be fascinated by that, as witnessed by the absolutely endless amount of, true crime podcasts and serial killer Netflix documentaries and everything like that. So even when it's an absolutely horrific and terrible and, lurid thing that someone is passionate about in all of the wrong ways, for whatever reason, human beings, we are very, very, very attracted to people who are passionate. So anyway, the thing that I wanted to bring up here has to do with Squid Game. Okay, I know this is really random.
What?
Yeah, it's super random. I know, but it's not that random because the Squid Game show just came out. I think last week.
It's out already?
Yes, I believe so. I believe it just came out on like Friday or something. I believe it came out last week. Anyway, when Squid Game, the show, first came out, there were these endless think pieces and essays and videos about it being a critique of capitalism. And from what I understand and from what I remember, I think that the creator of Squid Game even was quoted insofar as saying that the show was a critique of capitalism. Now, at that time, having just freshly watched the show and enjoying it, I liked it.
I liked it too.
My takeaway from it was that yes, while sort of on the surface, you could say that the problems that arise in Squid Game are a symptom of capitalism as an economic structure. Really, what is going on is the inevitability of human behavior and things like exploitation and greed and manipulation and boredom. Like these were really base level sort of human instincts that were being explored, kind of with this, in my opinion, flimsy framework of couching it as a critique of capitalism. Like I just found that part of it to be really shallow and bland and like I said, surface level. Like not like the problems that were happening in Squid Game were a lot deeper than an economic structure that has been around in human existence for like a handful of generations. Like these are things in that show that have been around since the dawn of humanity. So that's the first part. I mean, do you want to comment on that before I get to the second part?
Well, I have very little sympathy for that whole line of thought that you're critiquing. I mean, I agree with you completely on that. I think I'm stumbling because it's hard for me not to just say this is stupid and baseless. Because
it's midwit analysis.
Can you tell me,
I would call it midwit analysis. Yes. That's what it is. Let's just call it what it is. Let's not be coy about it.
Yeah. Can you tell me why capitalism made the one guy a shit father? This is dumb. It did his weird gambling addiction come from capital? No. Let me tell you, these habitual problems not only exist in the opposite type systems, but they're quite prevalent. The best example is probably the Soviet Union sure didn't curb alcoholism in Russia. Okay, it's the most intense area of alcoholism in the world, and that's unique because almost the whole world drinks. Certain pockets don't. Muslim countries don't. Tremendous broad social pressures that create problems that need to be solved by some venture you'd otherwise never take part in. That is not a unique to capitalism thing. I don't know. I tuned out for all of that because it was so dumb. But I mean, I see this every day where, I was just thinking about it with Pokimane recently, where she tweeted in the past that capitalism encourages psychopathic behavior.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, she's selling 4 bags, each of which is 4 ounces of cookies, for $28. I don't know if that's psychopathic. I don't think it is, but it's really simple. If I don't want the cookies, I don't buy them. That's a very good arrangement for both of us. We both get to play a role in it. But yeah, it's dumb. If anybody even begins to talk about these things, tune out. I don't know if I can think of one person who delves into like a topic like Squid Games as a commentary in like post-scarcity Marxist theory. Like, no, this is a waste of your time. It's dumb. Anyway, that's not a very useful thing to say. But
no, yeah. but I might mention something like, the 7 deadly sins predate capitalism. Like things.
Indeed, they do.
By quite a bit. Things like pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. I mean, you might want to just read up. Read up on the origin of like vices and sins.
Yeah.
before you lay everything at the feet of an economic system. But so like with that sort of as the precursor, that this stupid conversation has resurfaced in regards to the Netflix turning Squid Game into an actual game show. And now you're seeing like the same midwits marching out this stupid idea, complaining about how like messed up it is that Netflix didn't learn anything from the show. And as evidence of that, they're creating the very game, right, that was like a terrible exploitation of human beings in the TV show. And to everyone who says that and complains about that, I want to say, you are the one who missed the point. You are the one who did not understand the actual takeaway of Squid Game, which is that this stuff is inevitable. You cannot escape it. You cannot escape. You literally cannot escape any of these behaviors because they're fundamental to humanity. They're no matter what level of that hierarchy you're at, you're going to face these vices and you're going to be involved in exploitation. You're going to be involved in boredom. You're going to be involved in ignoring strangers and not helping, whatever it is, not caring about other people and caring about yourself more, in-group preferences, out-group hatreds. All of it is just part of the deal of being a human being. So the inevitability of Squid Game becoming a TV show, becoming an actual game show, what is like the most obvious thing you could possibly see happening off of the heels of the success of the TV show. Like, of course they made the show an actual game show. Of course they did.
How is anybody, and this goes for both, the actual new game show and the original TV show, how is anybody exploited? And that's a real question. I don't know if it's a stupid one, but those people in the TV show all knew going in that if they lost, they wouldn't live, right? Or am I wrong about that? That it was
I don't remember.
Truly all or nothing.
Yeah, I don't remember if they knew they were going to get killed.
Okay. Yeah, because that sort of bait and switch is obviously a problem. If you go in thinking that you're competing in a big fun game, and then you find out you're dead if you don't win, well, that is certainly using people in a bad way.
I also don't remember if they had the opportunity to quit. It's been years since I watched it. I don't know if anybody in the episode chat can answer either of those questions. If they had the opportunity to leave, yeah.
It was so long ago, I don't remember those details. But probably nobody's dying in the Netflix show. They're probably not killing off contestants. Who is being exploited in that show? What is the argument that anybody involved in that show is being exploited? In what way are they being exploited? I don't understand this. To have that happen, you have to be saying, for whatever reason, this is the only option in the world for these people. And that's not realistic. There's always another option. You might not like it. It might not give you the capacity to fully solve your problem, but there's another option. Who's being exploited? Oh, Dan says that they don't learn that they die until they're, deep into this. So,
but did they allow them to leave? Did they give them the option to leave? That is my question. Because I felt like they did, and they didn't leave, and nobody.
I feel that way too. That they had to have like unanimous agreement. Wasn't it something like that?
They could vote. They could vote.
They had to vote. They could vote to kill the game, but everybody had to vote to kill it.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway.
Well, to be honest, that wouldn't be a good show if they weren't forced into dealing with impossible choices. But that's a fictional show. The Netflix game. Here's what I feel. That saying that people are exploited is really just saying they are put in extremely difficult situations and under tremendous pressures, and that shouldn't happen. Those aren't the same thing.
Yeah, but I guess, ultimately my point on this is like, I don't know, maybe think about it for more than 2 seconds, maybe, or just like you said, just stop listening and put a moratorium on like midwittery.
But they can't think about it. They can't. I mean, they don't have the time to do that. I feel this way with doing shorts on the economics channel, where there's stuff that has a shelf life. You got to be quick. You got to be quick. Nobody wants to read the Squid Game analysis in February of next year. I don't think it's possible to give any of these topics their due unless you're positioned to know it and do it, and you think about this all the time anyway, and you're just kind of plugging in the details. But that's not, most Vox writers. Is Vox still around, or did that die this year?
I don't know. I feel like all of those websites are dead. I think Vox might still be around, though.
Yeah, Ducky said nobody wants to hear about the Pokemon cookie drama next year. Yeah, it came out, that short came out a week after it was the hottest. That's fine. It's not like it was totally dead, and it's also not, a drama commentary channel, so you can afford to do that. But, you got to do this stuff fast, really fast. You got to write that piece. So I think the alternative is you roll with what you've got and you shoot from the hip, and it creates the articles that we think are terrible, or you don't do it at all. Well, they got a job to do.
Yeah.
What do you do there?
Hopefully
What's
not
the
for
solution?
long. I think a lot of those magazines have been going bankrupt for a reason. It's because they're not actually offering anything of value to anyone. It's just a huge jerk off. And I don't know. That's how I feel about it. And so this stupid conversation is, surfacing once more because of this game show version of Squid Game. And my reaction is just, you might want to consider that there are human behaviors that are a lot more ingrained within us than simply saying, well, because of this economic structure, these people act in this certain abhorrent way. It's like, okay, that's.
We recently did a bit of work that included cannibalism, and
spoiler alert, that hasn't come out yet.
No, but aside from the N=1 occasional severely mentally ill Dahmer type, the capitalist countries don't have much of a cannibalism problem. They aren't
not really, no.
Really put into those. No, they aren't put into those circumstances, and some of the other systems have done a bit of people eating in recent times. There's that thing about, what was it, in Venezuela when the zoo got broken into and people ate the zoo animals. That wasn't good. I mean, I guess they got to feast on zebra, something like that. Like, not too many people have had a giraffe burger. It's pretty sweet. But being forced into breaking into the zoo for dinner is bad news. Yeah, so I don't really understand any element of the argument. It doesn't seem to match up with reality. And who said this? This may be a Shelby Foote thing as well. Oh, it is. It is. He gave an interview where he said that you go to school or live your early life, whatever it is you do, and then you spend the decades that follow finding out which parts of it are true. What actually matches the experience that you have in life, and that's very, very broad. That can be relationships and stuff too, friendships, even just the most basic things like that. My God, it can be pet ownership. Having a dog or a cat from my Twitter feed is the coolest thing in the world with no downside. The reality is that dogs are fairly high maintenance. Well, find out if your Twitter feed is real when you get a dog. But what I don't get with these pieces is that they don't really match up with reality. And I don't know how somebody can publish anything, do anything creative that is negated by reality. I don't know how you can bear to do that. I don't know how you click publish on that thing. You have to not realize. You have to not know.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
You have to be operating under a different reality for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But wouldn't you really want to make sure that what you thought matched with the world?
I don't know.
Where's the drive for that?
I don't know where the drive is for that. But yeah, I think that, one of the big takeaways from this episode is voluntarily going on a Netflix game show is better than eating children. That's That's one way to
That's
frame the discussion.
Really, just your opinion.
I guess so.
That's just your fascist political opinion.
It is. I am indoctrinated by reality. All right. That's it for this week. Thank you to all of our patrons for joining us during this recording. Dan the Latch, Ducky, Milady, Leander, Seb, Dangle, The Bed, Spoon. I know Charles Kahn was in here. Boss Threads was in here.
Conrad as well.
Conrad
had to
shout out.
Go to work.
Go to
exploited
work
by his employer.
Yes, he did have to be exploited by his employer. If you want us to exploit you, please go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown. We'd be happy to do so. We'll be back next week. Until then, see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezergood, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Farrakhan, Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Vidioger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Guff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Jelxies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.